Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had someone ask me on Instagram a couple days ago, what are my thoughts on intermittent fasting? So let me go ahead and do that. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a bit, and let's talk about this. So what are my thoughts on intermittent fasting? Well, intermittent fasting is just waiting till later in the day to eat breakfast. That's my thoughts. I'm just kidding. Okay, that is what it is. In its simplest form, it is basically delaying your breakfast until later in the day. Or for some people who follow stricter versions of it, it's giving yourself a designated eating window and you stay fasted the rest of the time. Now, as far as my stance on this, I'm going to attribute this down to being an individual tool in your toolbox. Scientifically speaking, the science and the research hasn't actually been that kind to it. But I think the reason for that is because when you're looking at something as a collective of how many people does it work for, is the overall benefit of it positive in terms of body composition, diet adherence, muscle gain, fat loss, things like that. When we're looking at it from that perspective in an overall spectrum, it actually hasn't turned out to be that useful. But that's because it's not necessarily good for some of those things. It's not necessarily good or useful to the majority of people. However, for a pretty large number of people who utilize it, it is an effective diet adherence tool. And here's the thing with it. If you know how to use a tool like that and it works for you and it's helpful to you for your overall diet adherence, by all means use it. By all means use it. Just understand that this isn't some miraculous tool that's automatically going to make you eat less calories. It's not some miraculous tool that's automatically going to burn body fat off of you. But in certain situations, for a lot of people, it can be a valuable weight loss or weight management tool, and there's a number of reasons for that. And even myself, I'm messing with kind of a variation of it, not every day, but a lot of days, like right now. I mean, I'm down 20 pounds right now. I still eat a very high carb diet. I have a lot of physical activity. For me personally, on days when I'm not going to lift weights in the morning, do I do a version of intermittent fasting? Yeah, I wait to eat breakfast. A lot of times I wait to eat breakfast until noon, sometimes 1 o'clock. And the reason for that is that I find that I tend to be very, very hungry first thing in the morning, and I have a voracious appetite. Now, me personally, this is just my personal anecdote, I find that doing cardio when I get really hungry will stave off my hunger sometimes. And that being said, if I wait till later in the day to eat, and I eat high satiety foods, and you know, in my case, it probably gives me about an 8-hour feed window, 8 or 9 hours to eat. If I start eating about noon, I'm probably not going to eat much past 8 o'clock or so, my last meal of the day. So if I wait till noon to eat and I have an 8-hour window, I'm going to tend to eat less if I'm eating higher satiety foods. Now, that being said, I also notice that cardio tends to blunt my hunger sometimes. So a lot of times I get up in the morning, if I'm really hungry, I will jump on my bike for an hour while fasted. All right, that blunts my hunger a little bit. Sometimes I don't get hungry again for an hour or two after I get done with my cardio. So in that case, I find that doing fasted cardio in the morning sometimes is a valuable tool to get my appetite back under control. Does that mean that's a universal tool? Does that mean that's going to work for you and your appetite? No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean that at all. And that's what it comes down to, individual diet adherence. Now, another thing to point out, people say, oh, so are you saying you ascribe to fasted cardio? No, not really. If fasted cardio causes you to eat less because, again, you're spending less time eating, especially earlier in the day because you're doing cardio instead, and it blunts your hunger, then yeah, fasted cardio could be a valuable tool. The data on it hasn't been kind, meaning we generally find that people who eat carbs before they do their cardio in the day usually end up burning more fat. They end up having a slightly higher energy turnover because they have more energy when they actually do their cardio. See, people have this idea that because you're fasted, they're like, oh, well, you're just going to burn more body fat because your resting glucose is lower and everything. Not necessarily, because you're going to burn less calories too, because you're not going to have quite as much energy. You might not be as vigorous in your cardio session, so your total energy turnover might be a little bit lower. Furthermore, fasted cardio can be mildly catabolic. It can be a little rough on muscle retention. Again, depending upon the person and how extreme it is and how big your deficit is. Unless, of course, you're obviously getting food shortly after your cardio. So there is that to factor in. So fasted cardio isn't the fat loss tool that it's been made out to be. If anything, the data over the years has suggested that fed cardio probably has a slight advantage for energy turnover. So it comes down to overall diet adherence. Is it a tool that's going to cause you to eat less through the day if you have a major eating problem? As far as controlling your body weight, controlling body composition, yeah, it can be a valuable tool. Fasted cardio can be. In that regard, depending on the person, now someone else might get even more ravenously hungry. They end up burning less energy from fasted cardio than fed cardio. And then they eat even more right after sometimes when they get done with it. So if that's the case and that's the person, then maybe it's not so valuable of a tool. If it helps control your overall appetite, it can be a useful tool. But people need to understand fasted cardio is not some magical fat burning tool that's automatically going to burn body fat off you. It doesn't work that way. Like anything else, it's one tool in the toolbox, and that tool might not be the best tool for the job depending on what you're doing. And what you're doing has to do with your individual appetite hormones, your individual diet adherence for you as a person. You know, just like things like ketogenic diets. Ketogenic diets actually aren't found to be that good for fat loss overall. However, some people swear by them. For some people, they're an amazing appetite suppressing tool. And if you happen to be one of those people, in overeating is a problem and ketogenic diets suppress your appetite, help you control your caloric intake through the day better, then it's going to be a very, very valuable fat loss tool. But people need to remember ketogenic diets burn less body fat, usually on a basis per basis, like an equal basis of energy intake. You end up burning less on a ketogenic diet than you might do on a higher carb diet. And there's data on that due to thermic effect, everything else. Yet some people lose weight more quickly on them because they control their appetite better. And at the end of the day, appetite control and diet adherence is the most important individual factor for losing body fat and managing your body weight. It's the most important factor, your individual appetite control, not what's going to burn the most body fat. Because we know ketogenic diets on an equal calorie basis are not anywhere near the best actual fat burning diets. They just aren't. Same thing, fasted cardio is not the best way to burn body fat. You burn less energy, you use less energy during fasted cardio, so it contributes less to your caloric deficit. But it might suppress your appetite more, depending upon the person, in which case your appetite suppression supersedes the body fat burning effect of something that might be more superior. At the end of the day, it's still about energy turnover. It's all about energy turnover. And energy turnover, a lot of people, if you only look at the energy out equation, things like fed cardio look better. Things like ketogenic diets look terrible. But if those things help you with your energy inside, because you take less in, they become valuable. All right, same thing with intermittent fasting. Same thing with intermittent fasting. The problem is that intermittent fasting can be more difficult on muscle tissue. It can be a little harder on muscle retention because you're going long periods of time without getting carbs, particularly long periods of time without getting protein. If you have a pretty small feed window, that isn't ideal for muscle growth or retaining muscle mass. And if you're not retaining muscle mass, ideally, you're not losing body fat ideally, because ideally, from an ideal diet and training situation, you're going to lose exclusively body fat. And anything that helps you preserve muscle tissue becomes valuable there. So you're balancing things like that of how efficient is the diet versus how does it control an individual's appetite. And a lot of people simply find diet adherence to be a superior on intermittent fasting. It's not a magical fat burning or muscle sparing protocol by any means. So then we come around to fasted training, and that's the other point. Like with me, if I'm going to go lift weights in the morning, I eat breakfast immediately. I eat a bunch of carbs as soon as I get up out of bed. Why? Because that's also been shown in the data. Training fasted stimulates less muscle growth, period, flat out, not even subject to debate. You simply cannot train as hard or produce the same workloads or the same tonnage when you are fasted as you can if you've eaten carbs before you train. Every expert in sports nutrition agrees on that. That, again, not even really debated out there. So that kind of comes to the other point when it comes to things like intermittent fasting. Does it have a place when you're trying to gain muscle mass? Probably not ideal for most people, because you're not getting ideal muscle protein synthesis if you're eating all your food in a small window. And unless you're training at some point later into your feed window, if this person is using intermittent fasting, you're not stimulate the most muscle growth possible from a workout either. Because fed training generally produces a larger anabolic response, and it allows a higher workload and deeper metabolic fatigue in the muscle tissue because you have more fuel to train on. So again, intermittent fasting can be a valuable diet adherence tool, which can make it great for fat loss for some people. It can be great for different things, but when it comes to gaining muscle mass, intermittent fasting and training when fasted, particularly lifting weights when fasted, needs to go out the window. You've either got to drop your fasting protocol on the days in which you are going to lift with any appreciable workload, or you need to put those workouts into the point of the day where you've broken your fast and had a meal or two already. So again, that's your best workaround there. Remember, intermittent fasting has not shown to be particularly useful in phases where you're trying to gain muscle. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.